All right, so we started there, like most bands start, on their porch or on their patio of their parents' house. Then we graduated. Then Kent and Mike asked me to join a band that they had just moved over to called the River City Band. And that had Lee Meacham and local Jim Tusa. And these guys could really play. So I was 12, right? I started playing bass when I was 11. I think I was 12 when they asked me to come over there. Because their bass player at the time, Bob Bello, had moved on, and Bob had also quit the jazz band at that point. So then I got drafted by Bob Goheen, the music instructor at that time, to join the jazz band, which was very cool. I was, as a bass player in Jackson, Minnesota. Do we have any bass players in the house? I know there's at least, there's 2, 3. By the way, my nephew, Nathan Ellison, who's the opening act tonight, special guest. Right, so give a shout out to them. You're playing at 9:30, right? Yes. Okay. So cool. So if your ears aren't roached after the races, come and hear them. They will finish you off, right? So as any good metal band does. So they're playing tonight, and then we will usher you out at the end at 10:30 when we play tonight. But so as a bass player in a small town like Jackson, I was just looking for anybody to play with. Anybody, I was calling the church guitar player, come out to my house, play. So Greg's giving me signs. I can't read signs. Okay, good. Do your thing. Yep. Greg's taking a shower. Awesome. Thank you for that. It'll be better on stage tonight. So it is hot up here. We were up here sound checking earlier. So thanks for everybody who was helping out with that. But so going from that and then to playing in the River City Band, and then somehow Taz formed out of that. And we were talking about the name Taz, where the heck that came from. And Greg had reminded me, so back in about late 70s, certainly the early 80s, there's a lot of these big bands coming out in Minneapolis and groups that had played around. And we were going to call the band Toys, like T-O-Y-Z. But we thought better of it because we knew in 2022, when we do our 40-year reunion, that would be a ridiculous name, right, to call ourselves Toys. So we called ourselves Taz. And what we then realized is that when you go to the doctor and you see the eye chart, right, the eye chart that they make you read and cover your eye, the third line down is Taz. So that didn't seem like the best logo, so we kind of made this one back here. And so we'll have some shirts tonight, and everything's for sale. Gene Simmons and Paul Stanley from Kiss have taught us everything's for sale, right? God bless them. So this microphone I'm spitting into will be for sale. We'll buy Jeremy another one. So we've got, we'll hang out after our show tonight, and there's over by the camper there, we'll have some t-shirts and books and stuff, and we'll say hello to everybody and sign some things. And so if anybody wants to take home Taz t-shirt, we will have them. So even a couple of stage-used basses with Taz stickers on them. So those are all for sale. So in hopes we can grow more bass players in Jackson, Minnesota, by the way. So after that, I think, then we came up here, we played at the fair. That was a big gig. I was looking at the pavilion today like that. If you're like 15, 16 years old and you're playing Olson's Pavilion at the county fair, that's a big gig. That's like an arena gig. I think from there, that band morphed a little bit. We got a couple of members out of Wyndham, changed our name to Killers. And the reason we did that is because our new favorite band, Iron Maiden, had an album called Killers. And I would later learn, in Megadeth, bands name themselves after songs, right? So I kind of took it as an honor when people call themselves Darkest Hour, all these different things. So and then, Greg and I had the idea to move to Los Angeles right out of high school. And back in that day, you had to relocate. Of course, this was before the internet. And before you could write a song at home and put it up on YouTube or Facebook or whatever. So for us, we had to relocate. And it was either New York or LA. My friend Vaughn Scow, he moved to Nashville, and Vaughn is still in Nashville. In fact, I see him when I go there. We connect regularly. So he had country music in his heart. He went there. Me and Greg had rock and roll in our hearts. We went out to Los Angeles. And right after I got there, we needed a guy to buy us some beer, quite honestly, because we were 18 and the drinking age in California was 21. So we knocked on our neighbor's door upstairs, and he happened to be a guy also by the name of Dave, and he was telling us about this group that he was in called Metallica. And we hadn't heard of that band yet because living here in the Midwest, news traveled a little slower. It was usually by magazines like Circus Magazine, Rock Scene, Cream Magazine, things like that. And unless you live closer to Minneapolis and you could listen to like 93X, which wasn't there. It was at that time, it was KQRS 92. They played all the cool, kind of rock radio stuff that we didn't have here. We had KKOJ, who was awesome for here and very supportive to me and everything I've done here in Jackson over the years. But their playlist was country music, or at least at the time it was. So we get to LA, suddenly we're hearing all this new stuff, right? All of a sudden it's Motley Crue and Rat. A Quiet Riot is now #1 on MTV, and MTV was brand new at the time, of course. So all these things were happening, and right behind that generation would be what we now know as the Big Four: Metallica, Megadeth, Slayer, and Anthrax, right? So Greg and I meet Dave over a case of Heineken. We start talking about all the different stuff that Dave had been involved in. Dave Mustaine was his name, right? And you could tell this guy was definitely the real deal. Like, he stood out as a real guy. You can tell the people that want to be, and then the people that really are. And he was definitely one that really was. And so he had experience, as much as Greg and I had gigged around here, and we played Fox Lake Ballroom. That was kind of the big gig here, That was if you could play Fox Lake Ballroom, was really you'd arrived. You were at least kind of in the circuit at that point. And we would go over there and do 4 sets a night, 45-minute sets from 9 p.m. to 1 a.m. Usually come home, go to school the next day. We started playing in Marshall and all these different places around here. But in Los Angeles, you would play one set for like 45 minutes to an hour. And it was, kind of plug and play at the Whiskey, the Troubadour, the Roxy, these different clubs out there. The Starwood was a popular club where like Van Halen and Motley Crue and various groups had started. So it was just so cool coming from here, literally from right here, the Jackson County Fair, to go to Hollywood and to be part of that scene, And, I remember the inspiration I had the day we were rehearsing back at my, on the farm out at the Ellison household, and I had this inspiration. It hit me. I was 16 years old. I'll never forget it. And I was like, I have to get to LA. And it was really just this mission to go. And fortunately, there was a music school out there that's still there called Musicians Institute. And that school was really kind of the way, because if you're a parent, like I am, right, like probably many of you are, the last thing you want is your kid running off to Hollywood, right? Especially if you're from Jackson, Minnesota, you're like, what are you thinking? But fortunately, this music school allowed for that to kind of be a reality. Like, okay, there's an anchor, you're going to go to school there. And Greg and I found an apartment on Sycamore Avenue, which is kind of right behind the Chinese theater there, off Hollywood Boulevard. And this woman, Elvina, happened to be from Mountain Lake, right? So it was kind of like divine intervention. This must be meant to be. So we move out there. And like I said, we get this whole thing going. And, we start this group and it was actually Greg's idea to call the group Megadeth. And it was based on a line of a lyric that Dave had written, a song called No Survivors, and it had this line in there that said, the arsenal of Megadeth can't be rid. And it was referring to nuclear disarmament back in that day. This is 1983, Reagan is president, and all that was around that. So Cold War and all this kind of stuff. So the name stuck. It was pretty heavy. Probably the heaviest name at that time was Black Sabbath, which was still pretty dark and pretty heavy. So, I call home and talk to my mom and dad, Gordon and Francis Ellison, who if many of you may know. So imagine me telling them, that I'm dropping out I'm not going to school, and I'm going to start this band called Megadeth, right? So you kind of have to they're like, what's it called? It's like, Megadeth, That's something probably the Lutheran Church at that time would approve of, right? But we're going for it because this is what you have to do. And, really I realized that, the best music that really stands the test of time is usually quite often very polarizing, right? You either love it or you hate it. And there is a divisive line between it. Or it's something so catchy like Pharrell Williams, writes a song about being happy that is just so infectious that even if you hate it, you can't get it out of your head, right? It's like a Windex commercial or something, right? It just sticks in your head. So I realized, I guess I'm learning the craft of really true professional, being a professional, not only just a musician, but an entertainer. All of these things are coming in. I realize now I'm really in show business, and it isn't just about your playing and your chops. And I realize when you're on the stage, if you're on the stage, there better be something different about you than just the normal person, right? Because that's why normal people pay to go see entertainers. They want to be entertained. So it's your look, it's your sound. Behind the scenes, as we're crafting songs, we're going in the studio, we're learning the craft of writing, we're learning the process and the arts of being a recording artist, like a proper, going in the studio and the different technicalities of that. And so this is really like this whole next level process, to learn this stuff. And we get our first record deal, we put our first record out. It does okay. It was a small little independent record. We didn't have a lot of money. But like any band who's out working, you just have to pack it up and go. Like today, I wish we're already rehearsed, we've got it all done. I wish we could just hop in the hand of its little bus over here and just go on tour for like a month, right? Because we've already done all the work. And so thank you for helping out with all that. But once you got it already up and running, it's like let's go, let's go rock. So it's so as we move along, we do a little tour, we come back home, and the record company allows us to make a second record. And that's one thing I've learned, not only in life but certainly in the record business, is none of this is guaranteed. And just because you had a hit once doesn't mean you're going to have one again, right? So it's this very nebulous business of entertainment. And so we get the chance to make a second record, and Capitol Records sees us play in New York City and offers us a deal. And this was pretty big stuff, because I remember at home, my mom had the Beatles album that had a Capitol Records logo on it, right? And Frank Sinatra and Tina Turner and Bob Seger and big stars are on Capitol Records. So we make our record gets signed to Capitol. And I remember bringing it home, and we were watching this album called Peace Sells But Who's Buying, going around and around on the turntable with this Capitol logo, just going, wow. Next thing we know, we hear this little bass line that I have that's like the introduction of the title track, Peace Sells But Who's Buying. Suddenly we start hearing it on MTV all the time. It's like played for like the little news segment. And we're going, wow, like MTV's like using our little riff right there, right? And so it started to become kind of part of the culture and the fabric of that day. And as we go back out on the road, Alice Cooper agrees to take us out on tour, and other heroes of ours, Ronnie James Dio, Iron Maiden. All of a sudden we're like sharing stages with our heroes, which is really a cool thing. So as it goes, and this doesn't all come without some expense. It's almost like, if you're moving, flying at Mach speed, you're bound to hit some turbulence, right, along the way. So none of us are without fault of that, and there's drugs and alcohol and all the other things that you're warned about, certainly if you grow up in Jackson, Minnesota. And being a confirmant of the Our Savior's Lutheran Church, we know right from wrong and all this. But as you're moving through life and doing all that, you've got to deal with all these outliers as well. So, and I've written about it in my memoir and everything. So, I think kind of our big hit really came in the 90s. That was when it was really our turn up to bat, and things really took off to another level, and we started to become a household name. People started to know the name of the group. They started to have our records. And, I think then by that point, by the time we turned into the 2000s, we'd been a group now for almost 20 years. And it was like, if it's, the only thing harder than starting something and having some success is maintaining it, right? Because there's a lot of things you can change or that you can control, which is, your sound and kind of maintaining that. But some of the things you can't control are like when Nirvana shows up and Seattle music shows up and tries to dethrone heavy metal and all these other things, right? So you can't always determine the things outside in the world that are going to change culturally, and things that move so much faster now because of the internet. And now record companies are giving huge record deals to TikTok stars, and TikToks are like what, 16 seconds? Is that about right? So 16 seconds of fame is all it takes to get a record deal now. And of course, it's the young that get the record deals. So the young people get those, and at least to launch their careers, and hopefully as it goes on, you're able to maintain it. So it's been a really wonderful journey. Greg and I were talking today, hand of it, that is. I feel like I don't know anybody who works as hard in the music business as I do, and I know people who work really hard. And that's not to say that I'm the only one. I'm just saying there's a bunch of all of my friends and the people that are still doing this, whether it be Kiss or Slipknot, Corey Taylor, obviously does a lot of stuff. It's not something, the public gets to see the, hour we're on stage, and it's the other 23 hours where all the hard work happens. Even for us, we get to perform on stage like tonight. Me and Greg and Justin and Tim and Sean are joining us on guitar. We get to have this 1 hour. We've been listening to these songs for weeks. We got together up in Mankato for 2 days. Again, the flights, the rental cars, the travel, the this, the that, the sound check. We probably put, I would say, somewhere probably close to at least 100 hours, just us. That doesn't include the time we spent at home learning the songs. So several hundred hours have gone in, if not maybe close to 1,000 hours if you count individually, to just come up here and play for 1 hour. And, as we were talking earlier, it's not something we do, it's who we are, right? It's just who we are. People think you're crazy. It's like, what the heck's the matter with you? It's like, well, why wouldn't we do this? Like, what else are we gonna do? So I think that becomes, you're sort of born to do this, probably like the people racing on the track tonight, right? There's a part of them, they want to go fast, they want to do that, so that's what they do. That's why they're race car drivers. It's not something they do, it's who they are. So that is all I'm going to talk about. Does anybody have any questions that they may want to ask? Now, of course, everyone's going to get really